Hello, my name is David Clark, and I'm like to welcome you to the second hour of my talk on high-speed evolution. I think this is an exciting story, and I hope you enjoy it. So this follows my first hour of this talk, which was divided into three parts. The first part of it, I presented an outline of biological evolution, where I emphasized those parts of it and those aspects of it that are directly relevant to what I'm doing now. In the second part, I presented a class of electronic switching circuits, which I'm interested in figuring out how to design to meet certain given performance specifications. And this turns out to be a hard problem. In the third part, I give what I think is very compelling evidence that the methods and methodologies that were available when I first started looking at this were totally insufficient to be able to produce these designs in a computationally reasonable amount of time. So there was essentially no practical solution to the problem. So I want to tell you now in this hour what I've done in the recent years and about a new kind of methodology that I've brought to bear on this problem that is drawn from biological evolution. So in order to do this, I need to share the screen. And so I'm going to try to do that now. So I'll press this button, share screen. And then I have to find the screen I want to share, and it's right here. So let's see if this works. Okay, there it is. So you should now see my screen where it says Part 4, Evolutionary Computation, and I'm up there in the corner. Okay, so this all started for me about 15 years ago in 2007. And the problem I'm looking at, this design problem for these circuits, actually grew out of an area of investigation in mathematics, in specifically universal algebra, that spanned most of the 20th century. And this problem was an outgrowth of that work. And so it was a problem that I was familiar with, but I hadn't done any work on it. Nobody that I know of had done any work on it because nobody had any idea what to do. But I just had it in mind, and I was amused by the fact that it seemed to be so difficult. And so it was about that time that I heard about a fellow at Hampshire College in Massachusetts named Lee Spector. And he was doing some work with something he called evolutionary computation. And this was supposed to be some kind of method to use a computer and simulate biological evolution on a computer in order to find solutions to problems. And so I'm a mathematician, and so I'm interested in solving problems. And I've also had a long-term interest in biology and evolution. And so I found this interesting. And so I invited Lee to come to New Paltz, where I was teaching, to give a colloquium lecture in our scientific colloquium series on the work he was doing. And so in his lecture, we learned that evolutionary computation had had some nice successes. Most of the problems that it solved were problems that wouldn't have been hard for a human being to solve, but it was just really amusing to see that they could be solved by simulating evolution. But when I saw what he was doing, I got very interested. And after his talk, I went up to him and I said, you know, I'm aware of a problem that's a longstanding problem that seems to be very hard, that I think might be adaptable to the methods you're talking about. And I told him about this design problem, and he was very interested. And so we started working together. And so I want to tell you what we found and where it led us. So we're starting with the design problem. So we have a gate, and I'm going to use this same gate that I used before, this 3-element gate. It's not any special 3-element gate, it's just one of many that I could have used, but we'll use this as an example. So we have that gate, and we have over here on the left, we have a target output that we'd like to get from a circuit. So we would like to see if we can design a circuit or find a circuit that will produce exactly that output. And so we didn't know what to do, so we just tried one. You try a circuit like this. So this is the circuit that you saw before in the previous talk. And over here is the table that gives all of its outputs. And we saw there that it doesn't do very well. It gives here some outputs that match the target. So the first two do, but most of these don't. And I can highlight the ones that don't in red there. Now this table, remember, has all of the possible input sequences of values for X, Y, and Z for the circuit. And there's 27 different possible input values. So that table is supposed to have 27 rows, but I didn't draw them all because they don't fit on the screen so that you can see them. So I just put in 14 of them. And there's 13 here that are missing. But if you look at those 14, what you see is that there's only 4 of them where it matches the output, and there's the other 10 that don't. So it got about a third of them right and about 2/3 of them wrong. So if we filled in the missing ones, you'd expect that about a third of those 27 would come out right. So that's about 9, and the other 18 would come out wrong. We could try another circuit. Here's another circuit. This one right here is just some other circuit. And I've put here, I've calculated all these 14 output values. And what you see there is that of those 14, this time, only 4 of them are wrong, and the other 10 are right. So now this one's getting about 2/3 of them right and about 1/3 wrong. And so out of 27, we'd expect it to get about 18 right, whereas the first one out of 27 was getting only about 9 right. Well, this suggests something important. When we do this, we not only find out for each circuit whether or not it's a solution, but we also find out how close it came to being a solution. And this suggests the key idea that's needed to do evolution, and that is the idea of fitness. Here, if we have a particular gate and a particular target, we can take any circuit and we can define its fitness. Given a target and a gate, we define the fitness of a circuit to be the number of its outputs that match the target. And so in this example, we see that our switching circuit number 1 here, the first one, has fitness about 9. And switching circuit 2 has fitness about 18. And so if you had, for example, a circuit that had fitness 27, well, that would mean that it got the right value matching the target in every single place, in which case it would be a solution. So a solution is just a solution to the design problem will just be a switching circuit that has fitness 27. And so you imagine that we might want to look at lots of circuits and try to find high fitness circuits and more high fitness circuits with the hope of getting one of fitness 27. Well, that sounds like evolution. This could be done as an evolutionary process. And it would look like this. We can just write down any DNA sequence. There's a DNA sequence. This happens to be the DNA sequence of that second circuit that I just showed you. So we can write down any DNA sequence, and then we can use it to build a circuit like this circuit on the left. And then we can take that circuit and we can feed it all 27 possible inputs, and we can calculate its outputs, and then we can see how many of them match the target, and that will be its fitness. So if we do that with this one, it's going to have a fitness of about 18. Now imagine we do this with a whole bunch, starting with a whole bunch of DNA sequences. So say we generate 100 random DNA sequences. That's something a computer can do in a moment, to generate 100 random DNA sequences like that. And then what we can do is take each one of those and we can build its circuit from the DNA sequence. And then we can use the circuit to calculate its fitness. And so suppose we had 100 of these DNA sequences. So we build 100 circuits and we calculate the fitness of each one. And now what we could do is maybe pick out the 10 that had the highest fitness. And so we take those 10, and now we could do mutations on those 10 to generate another 100 by doing 10 mutations on each one. So for each one of those high fitness circuits, we can do mutations on it. We might change a Y to a Z, or we might move some parentheses, or we might add something onto it somewhere. Just do little changes in it to make 10 more that are somewhat similar to it. And that gives us a new population of 100 DNA sequences. But each of these DNA sequences has a parent from that high fitness group. So they tend to be higher fitness. They tend to create higher fitness circuits. And we build all those circuits, we use them to get their fitness. And then again, we pick out the fittest ones of those. And that's going to be a higher fitness population than we started with. So we may get even higher fitness ones in that population. And now we just go round and round like that, just keep doing that. And our hope is that eventually we'll come up with a circuit that has fitness 27. And now that would be a solution. So this describes a nice evolutionary process. And in this process, we have the DNA sequences acting as the genotypes, and the circuits themselves, the physical circuits, acting as the phenotypes. And this is this evolutionary process now is working just like evolution does in nature. It's a very similar pattern. And just like evolution in nature, it has the same liability. If you look at this process, you can look at what is the time for this process. And what you see is that generating the DNA sequences and generating mutations in them is all computations that a computer can do very fast. The slow part of this is taking a DNA sequence and physically building a switching circuit. That's going to take a lot of time. And then feeding in all the inputs to it and getting the outputs, that's the time-consuming part. But now, remember that we saw that we can actually calculate outputs of the circuit using just the DNA sequence. We just substitute 0, 1, or 2 for each of X, Y, and Z, and we calculate this expression, and we get what the output is. And then we can look at all those outputs and count how many match the target and get the fitness. So we can do all of this without using the phenotype, the physical circuit. The physical circuit was just used to, like any other phenotype, to test fitness, but we can test fitness with just the genotype. And that's what we wanted at the beginning, a context where we could do evolution, but we could calculate fitness just from the genotypes, and we could dispense with the phenotypes. And so this is what Lee and I found when we were working on it. And we worked together to write a program that would do this. Now, there's a lot of details in order to get a program that will work. There's a lot of parameters that have to be tuned right to get it to work. So it's a complicated process. But after about 6 months, we found a working program that gave us some interesting results. And I'd like to show that to you. So here we have, again, using this gate. We did this with lots of different gates, got similar results. And here we have some random target. And now what we know is that there's 3 to the 27th, about 10 trillion different possible circuits that could be constructed with 3 elements. And we have to find the one single one that will give this target. And we found before that that is not easy to do, that if we used a random search to do that, it would take about 4 months with a computer running round the clock and testing 1 million circuits a second to find that. So we tried it with our evolutionary program. And what we found is that we got a solution, this solution, in 5 minutes. And we repeated that with lots of examples, and they were similar to this. So we were very pleased with that. Going from 4 months to 5 minutes is a big improvement. And that's just what we were hoping to get. So this is a nice example of what can be done with evolution on this problem. And we were pleased with it. In fact, we actually won a prize for it, which seemed sort of strange to me because I am used to publishing my work in a scientific journal and giving talks about it, but I never before or since have gotten a prize for it. But we won the first medal the first prize in an international competition in 2008, where we were competing with other people who had found some kind of results with evolutionary computation. And as I said, most results that people got were problems that could be solved easily by a person, but it was interesting to see that evolution would do it. And so when we gave them our entry, we told them that this problem we could calculate would take 4 months for a computer testing 1 million a second to find this, and that our program found it in 5 minutes. And if you compare that with a human being, for a human being to test a single circuit, well, they have to write down the circuit, and then the DNA sequence, and then they have to use it to calculate the table for that circuit and see if it matches the target. And so it's going to take a human being at least 15 minutes per circuit to do that, rather than a millionth of a second. And that will mean that in order to do 10 trillion of them, it's going to take several lifetimes for the person to do. So basically, this couldn't possibly be done. It was not only a challenge for a human being, it would be impossible for a human being to do. So based on that, they gave us this big prize. So anyway, we were very happy with this. And this led us to start thinking about whether we could improve on it. And so we identified at the beginning of the last talk two possible ways of speeding up evolution. One was to dispense with the phenotypes and use just the genotypes to do the calculations. And that's what we did, and that's what led to this success. The other thing we identified from nature that sped up biological evolution was the introduction of sexual reproduction, two-parent evolution. And so we decided to see if we could do something with that. So this is the fifth part of my talk. Now, one thing we see from evolution, from biological evolution, is that the first life forms that appeared after 1 billion years of the Earth cooling off used one-parent evolution, simply splitting and using mitosis to make two clones of itself. And Lee and I had used one-parent evolution in what we did. We took a DNA sequences and we just made little variations in it. So each one had one parent. And for biological evolution, it took, after those first ones appeared, it took another 3 billion years to evolve sexual reproduction and two-parent evolution, to develop it completely to the point where it became the standard and the norm in all of nature with plants and animals. And so it is more complicated than one-parent evolution. And that added complication was reflected in our work. In order to get started with two-parent evolution, we really needed to understand what was happening a bit better. And so I spent a lot of time working on this and working with others, and I want to tell you about that. So this is what I've done since 2008. So the first question I was concerned with is looking at these gates that I've shown you. I've shown you several gates, and I didn't say much about where the gates came from. I just said you can use any gate you want. But what I was interested in is knowing which gates would lend themselves to evolutionary methods. And that was hard to tell, but what I did is I isolated a feature of these gates that I expected would be what would be needed for evolutionary processes to work. Basically, what I needed is for small changes, mutations in the DNA, the genotype, to lead to small changes in the performance of the circuit. That's what I felt was needed to make evolution work. And what I did is I proved a theorem, a big theorem in 2013, which gave a simple test to look at a gate and tell if it had that property. So that took me a long time to do. This was a lengthy paper that was published in the International Journal of Algebra and Computation in 2013. And I called those gates, this property, term continuity. So a gate is term continuous if it has that property. The second project I did was with Lee and also Martin Keijer, who's expert in machine learning. And the three of us developed a specific algorithm to solve the design problem. This was not an evolutionary algorithm, but it was motivated by looking at evolutionary algorithms. And it solved the problem efficiently. We published this in 2016. And part of what we did was we showed that this algorithm, it turned out, would work with a gate if and only if that gate was term continuous. So it was just the gates that I identified in the first paper that this other algorithm will work on, even though it wasn't evolutionary algorithm. So this condition is more broader than evolutionary methods. The third project was published in 2018, again in the International Journal of Algebra and Computation. And this I did with Lee. And it was here that we focused on sexual reproduction and looking at algorithms that use sexual reproduction and how that might work. And so this was a theoretical paper. And in it, we proved a theorem that showed that sexual reproduction, how it would be effective in solving the design problem, provided the gate was term continuous. So again, term continuity was the key to it. This was the theoretical paper. We didn't actually produce an evolutionary algorithm to do this, but we laid down the groundwork to do that. And I'm currently working on a fourth paper with Nick Falco to do exactly that. Nick was a computer engineering graduate at SUNY New Paltz in about 10 years ago. And as an undergraduate, he took an interest in this work, and I did a senior project on it. He was an outstanding New Paltz graduate. And more recently, I've been in contact with him again, and he's now a top programmer for the University of Washington in Seattle. And we've been working on building a two-parent evolutionary algorithm for solving this problem. And so I want to tell you now about briefly about the theorem in the third paper there and about the work that Nick and I are doing now. So what we got from thinking about this was some ideas about what constitutes an effective evolutionary computation method in this context. And what we found is there seem to be two requirements that we need to make evolution work. And so I'm not sure how much more broadly these would be applicable, but they certainly were what we went after and what we found useful. So the first requirement is that we need to maintain diversity in the population. And this is what I talked about at the beginning of that first talk. Diversity in the population that you're evolving means that natural selection has a lot to select from. And generally, diversity can be assured if the algorithm involves a lot of randomness. So a lot of random choices are made along the way. So this was one guideline that we wanted to follow. The second one is that we needed a good fitness function, a function that says which are fit. And this is what you saw with the single parent evolution, that the key in my thinking to seeing why this problem was a good problem for evolution is that I saw that fitness, a good fitness function for testing circuits to see how close they are to a solution, namely the number of right hits they give you. And a fitness function is some kind of a measure of fitness. And we can identify 3 requirements that we need the fitness function to have in order to be useful. So the first requirement is that higher fitness should mean that you're closer to a solution. And that's exactly what we saw with the one-parent evolution, that being a high fitness meant you're closer to the target. And as we worked with this, we found lots of instances where we could figure out some clever, interesting fitness function that we thought would really identify the best ones. But when we went to try to program it, we realized that it was just too complicated, that we'd take too much time. It would cost too much time to calculate fitness. And any evolutionary process has got to be testing fitness all the time. You look out in nature at the rabbit chasing the squirrel up the tree, and you're seeing fitness being tested for both of them. So evolution always means multiple tests of fitness. And so that means that a fitness function has to be very easy to calculate. It can't be something complicated. It has to be something that can be calculated very quickly. That, again, was true in the case of the one-parent evolution that we had. The third thing we need is that reproduction needs to support high fitness. So that means that when we reproduce, the high fitness of parents is inherited by the children. That generally high fitness parents will produce high fitness children. And better yet, it helps if the reproductive process actually tends to increase fitness. And so that's something that's rather unusual, but something that we wanted to look for. So these are these are the 2 components of what we need for evolution to work. And so we have these 2 requirements for evolution to work, and we're going to have 2 sexes, male circuits and female circuits, and we're going to try to evolve them. And so what we found when we looked at this, and it took a while to figure this out, but what we found is that we couldn't see any good fitness function for males, but we could see a very good fitness function for females. And so what we did is we decided to have a real division of labor here, where it would be the job of the males to be in charge of generating enough randomness to maintain diversity. So the males just have to be messy and random, and then they'll be doing what we need. And of course, that's the key to sexual reproduction, is that it will provide more diversity. So we assigned this job to the males. The hard work was left to the females to produce a good fitness function, and a fitness function that will satisfy these 3 difficult conditions. So I'm going to tell you about how this happened. So what we did is we found a different kind of circuit that we could use. And I've illustrated it here. This is a circuit that is like a normal circuit, but it has one of the gates replaced by this diamond, this Lagrange symbol. And the Lagrange symbol represents, you can think of it as a hole in the circuit. It's a missing piece of the circuit. So this is like a partial circuit that hasn't been fully completed. And what it needs is it needs a complete circuit put in where the Lagrange is. So we need a complete circuit, ordinary circuit like this one, that we can put in where the Lagrange is to create a circuit that's now complete and that has features of both of these two. So this looks something like sexual reproduction. We think of the first one there as a female circuit. So a female circuit's a normal circuit with one gate replaced by a Lagrange. And a male circuit is just any normal circuit. And given a female and a male, they can mate and create a child circuit right here. And you see in this one, the male right here has been put in for the Lagrange right there to create this new child circuit. And in fact, that child circuit is a male circuit the way we create it. So it's really a son. So the male and female mate and they create a son. Well, now I need to tell you more about where the fitness comes in and how this all works. But one observation I can make right now is that when we start combining circuits like this, they get very complicated. If we continue doing this, we will quickly get horribly complicated circuits that would be very difficult to draw and difficult to comprehend it all when you look at them. But what we observe here is what we've observed with the previous version of evolution, and that is that everything we need to do, we can do with the DNA sequences. Right here is the DNA sequence for that female with the Lagrange right here. Here's the DNA sequence for the male. And the DNA sequence for the son will be obtained by just putting the male sequence in for the Lagrange. Here it is right here. And the DNA sequence for the son is right here in the brackets, in the square brackets. So this sexual reproduction can be carried out just looking at the DNA sequences. And the DNA sequences, again, form our genotypes, and we just don't need the phenotypes at all. So we're going to dispense with the phenotypes and just write down the genotypes. And so I'm going to just toss them out along with their embellishments. And this will make it much simpler and easier to think about. So now I want to describe the evolutionary process. So this starts with a female here, and I just describe her as the genotype, the DNA sequence. And now the males are going to be, remember, the males are in their job is to ensure diversity with randomness. And that's easy to do. What you do is you just generate males at random. So I'm not going to try to evolve males. They're not going to have a fitness function. I'm just going to have over here on the right somewhere a random male generator. And anytime I need a male, I just push the button on the random male generator and it gives me a male. So there's my male and there's the female. And they can mate and produce a son. And there's their son. And so that's the role of the male in the sexual reproduction. Now, the role of the son is also simple. The only purpose of them mating to form a son is to see if they can produce a solution to the design problem. And so as soon as they produce a son, we'll calculate its output table and check and see if it's a solution to the design problem. And if it is, then we're finished and we stop. If it's not, then we just discard the son and send him on his way. Now, the other thing that the male and female can do is they can mate and form a daughter. And the way they do that is that instead of the male replacing the losange there, the male comes and parks himself next to the losange, right in that DNA sequence. So this is the same DNA sequence, but the losange is now replaced in the square brackets with this male next to the losange like this. The male can also sit on the other side to produce this daughter. So the male and female together, given a male and a female, they can produce exactly one son and two daughters. Now, I need to tell you what we do from here. And what we're going to try to do is evolve the females to higher fitness. So I have to start by telling you what the fitness function is for the females. And you remember we had 3 conditions for fitness on the female fitness. So I want to look at those. Remember, the first condition on the fitness was that higher fitness is supposed to mean closer to a solution. So here is a female, and she's going to try to produce a solution by mating with some male and producing a son. That's how she can produce a solution. So how do we figure how close the female is to a solution? Well, what we can do is look at all possible different males. So different males are ones with different output tables. We look at all different males and we ask, how many different males can this female produce a solution with? If she can produce a solution with a lot of different males, then she's close to getting a solution because the probability that she'll mate with one of those males is high. If she can get a solution with few males, then she's far from a solution. And so the probability that she'll get one is low and she's far from a solution. In particular, if she can't get a solution with any male, then we will just toss her out and look for more females. So for a female to consider to continue to be in the running, she has to be able to produce a solution with some male, even if it's not too many. So that's our fitness function for females. So when we get these daughters, now I want you to imagine that we're doing this now we have a whole collection of females. And what we're going to do is try to evolve this population of females toward higher and higher fitness. We aren't evolving the males at all. They just come at random from this male circuit generator. And we can get one anytime we need one. So the evolution is going to happen over on the left side here. And we're going to have a bunch of females. They're going to produce a bunch of daughters. And now we'll calculate the fitness of these daughters. Well, now right here, when we calculate their fitness, the second condition comes in. Fitness needs to be easy to calculate because we're going to be calculating a whole bunch of them. And so it turns out that this fitness measure that I just described to you if you think about it, it will seem like it would be very difficult to count how many different males she can produce a solution with. But, and I can't give any detail about this here, but it turns out that the way we're doing this, it's actually very easy to calculate fitness. It amounts to just multiplying some numbers together. It can be done very fast and efficiently. So we have a fitness function that meets these two conditions. Now, we have to look at the third condition. The third condition was that reproduction supports high fitness. Well, this we need to look at more carefully and see how this works. The first two conditions are satisfied, and we need to look at how does reproduction affect fitness. And so let's go back to the evolutionary process here. We have these daughters, and we're going to have a whole bunch of females, a whole bunch of daughters. And now what we do is we calculate the fitness of each of the daughters. And then what we're going to do is we're going to save the highest fitness daughters and throw out the rest. So suppose we do that and we find the first daughter just doesn't make the cut. So she gets thrown out. But the second one, she has high fitness. And so we keep her and she's part of the population. And we get a new population of females right here in this generation, the ones of high fitness. And so then for each of them, we match them up with a partner. So we go to our random male generator and we generate her a partner. And so suppose we generate this male that we're going to fix up with this daughter. And so they're going to mate and they're going to produce a son. And this male now is the son-in-law of these this original pair, and the child will be a grandson of that pair. And what we've done is just put the male in for the lozenge, and we get this grandson. And now, whenever we do that over on the right, the first thing we do is we check the male offspring to see if he's a solution to the design problem. And chances are he's not. And if he is, then we're all finished. If he's not, well, then we send him on his way. And we come back to this pair and we see if we get two daughters. So here we get two daughters that are now granddaughters for this pair. And putting the male, the son-in-law, on each side of the lozenge. And so here we have now the granddaughters, where if you look at them, the square brackets now still stand for what is replaced now in two steps, has replaced this original lozenge. All of this, what's outside of that is what was there originally. And so we can continue doing this. And as we do it, we move from generation to generation, generating more and more daughters and looking for a son that will be a solution. And so we continue generation by generation. Now, the question there was, does generating females, daughters, over on the left here, is that preserving high fitness? If we have high fitness parents, are we going to get high fitness daughters there? And this is a difficult problem, but I can give you a sense of what we found. And this is what Lee and I did in that third paper. The intuition is this: we look at these DNA sequences, the female, the daughter, the granddaughters, and look at the lozenge in those. What you see is that in each generation, the lozenge is getting buried deeper and deeper in that DNA sequence. And so what it looks like is that if you take this sequence and you calculate output values, as you go down with the lozenge deeper and deeper in there, the lozenge will have less and less impact on the output, which will mean that lots of males will actually give you the same output table, because the males, when they mate with one of these, they only affect what goes in for the lozenge. And if the lozenge has a small effect, then they won't have any effect on the output. And so that means that that there will be fewer and fewer different males coming out over here using these females. So you have a smaller number of different males, but remember that what that will mean is that the females, remember the females are required to be in the running here. They have to have high fitness, and the fitness has to be bigger than 0. In other words, there's at least one male that this female can mate with and get a solution. There's at least one. But what we find here is, and this is what the theorem says, is that as we go down through generations, the females will produce fewer different fewer different sons. And so the son that is a solution will be produced by more different females. In other words, the female will have higher fitness. So just this process itself is creating females with higher and higher fitness. And eventually, the theorem says, if you keep doing this and getting higher and higher fitness females, you'll eventually get a female where the lozenge has no impact on the output. And what that means is that every male will produce the same son with that female, because the lozenge has no impact on the output. But we know that some male will produce a solution because she's still in the running. And so if some male will produce a solution and all males produce the same son, then all males will produce a solution. And in that case, the next male that she mates with will produce a solution. And that is the big theorem in that third paper. And so by doing that, that guarantees that we'll eventually get a solution. And so this is the outline of how the sexual reproduction should work that we produced in the second paper, but it leaves an awful lot of details to be worked out to make an algorithm that will actually work. And that is what I've been working on with Nick the last few years. And we've come to some nice results, and I'd like to tell you about them. So we have now a working algorithm that follows this pattern, and it's given us some nice outputs. And so I'd like to show you an example of what it will give us. So what we did is we took this 3-element gate, and we wanted to compare what our sexual reproduction algorithm does with what the prior algorithm and the random search did. So you recall with this one, there's 10 trillion different possible circuits to examine. Random search testing 1 million a second would take 4 months to find a solution. One parent evolution took 5 minutes to find a solution, a big improvement. We tried this with our 2-parent evolution, and we got a solution in 0.37 seconds, a big improvement over 5 minutes. And here's the solution. It just fits on the screen there. So it's more complicated. If you want a solution with quickly, they do get more complicated. But we were really thrilled to see this. In fact, we had tried with the algorithm, the 1-parent algorithm, to find solutions for 4-element gates. And that was just not possible. We just couldn't make any headway with the 4-element gates using the 1-parent evolution. So we tried doing it to see if the 2-parent evolution would do any better. And so here's a 4-element gate. And remember now, the number of different possible circuits is 10 to the 39, the number of atoms in a cubic mile of water. This, it calculated, would take a random search 10 to the 25 years to find, much longer than the age of the universe. And so we decided not to be intimidated by all this, but to just try it with the 2-element, with the 2-parent evolution. And so we tried it, and it found a solution in just a little over a second. And here is the first part of the solution, and here's the rest of it. So it's complicated, but it found it in a little over a second, and that seemed amazing. And we were very pleased with this. And so, in fact, we were so pleased with it that we thought that we're willing to wait longer than a second, and we wondered just if it could do something with a 5-element gate. Now, a 5-element gate, when you increase the size of the gate, you increase the number of circuits you have to search enormously, as we've been seeing. So for 5 elements, the number of different possible gates is now 5 to the 125th power. That's about 10 to the 87. Now, this is a huge number. And just to get an idea of what that number means, it's a lot bigger than 10 to the 39. 10 to the 39 was about the number of atoms in a cubic mile of water. Well, astronomers have made an estimate of the number of atoms, not in a cubic mile of water, but in the entire visible universe. And the estimate they have is about 10 to the 80th atoms. So this is a lot more than that. 10 to the 87. It's just a gigantic number. So we tried it. And this would take the random search about 10 to the 74 years. So a ridiculous amount of time. And we tried this with the 2-parent evolution. And so we had to wait longer than a second. We had to wait almost 13 seconds. And it produced this solution. Well, this is the first part of it, and there's the second part of it, and there's the third part of it, and that's the end of it. So this was enormous success, and we are very happy with it. And what I really find this impressive demonstration of what can be done with evolution coupled with 2-parent reproduction. And so just in closing, I'd like to say that I am not sure that there are any practical applications of this in technology. I'm not sure if anybody can do anything with these circuits that we're producing. I rather expect not. But I think the real significance of this work is that it gives a strikingly impressive illustration of the kind of work that nature has been doing using evolution coupled with sexual reproduction for 500 million years now to produce the incredible variety of life forms on this planet that we've been lucky enough to inherit. And I just hope that this kind of work, or this work, will be a reminder that that what has been generated in 500 million years will be destroyed very quickly if human beings don't get together and become vigilant about protecting and preserving it for future generations. So with that, I thank you for listening and hope you found this interesting. Okay, so that's the end. And I thank you for your time.